I have a dream.
It's one small step for man.
I am the greatest.
You want something, go get it. Period.
What's up, my fellow dreamers, doers, achievers? This is episode number 28 of the Dream Big & Co. podcast, and just like this intro was different and unique, this episode is super unique in and of itself. Just to say a few things before we cue the pre-intro and full episode back to back, the guest for this episode is Biava. He is someone I've grown extremely close to in the past couple months, and this podcast is really just a microscopic look at what we talk about all the time. Sean is a programmer, writer, doer of life, and just an overall super inquisitive individual. There's no need for a true introduction as this episode unfolds and sort of reveals itself in ways that you will become aware of. Just as we talk about the topic of flow, the episode does the same exact thing, flowing in its own way. So I'll see you at the end. Enjoy, and let's cue it.
I think with meditation, we're learning to accept the mind and all of the things that it tells us. And in that, we can reach a state of flow. Love has been so important archetypally throughout history in growing not just men but women as well into their own roles, because it really acts as a mirror and shows us where we're not disciplined. I think that's love. I think love is being aware of the cycle that you are going through as a person and being willing to break that to become a better version of yourself. Then you have to deal with the pain of, okay, what did I just learn? And do I want to do anything about it? Can I do anything about it? Will I do anything about it? It's recognizing that there's not a right way, but being self-aware of, are you following your way? And here's a quote that you sent me from The Power of Intention. You said, "The nature of the universal mind is peaceful, not receptive to force or violence. It works in its own time and rhythm, allowing everything to emanate by and by. It's no hurry because it's outside of time. It's always in the eternal now." And so I think a good intention to set is we could talk about that eternal now, the things that we do to try to exist in it. How is it even possible to exist in it? Can we exist in it for long periods of time? And what is it like to not exist in it? Because I think that's something that you and I have been talking about a lot.
Yes.
I know it's something that you and mutual friends of ours have been talking about a lot. And
I'm feeling it.
I have been doing the same thing. So I think we can jump in right there. Knowing that to begin with are the meditation that we're going to do inside the break of this podcast is going to help us be more present during this recording. And so I look forward to what we talk about.
Yeah. And just like you mentioned in everything that is going on, there's this sort of centric topic of the focus on the present moment, the not being in the space of the present moment, being kind of wandered, lost, unsure, staggering and wavering. And there's, I think intention's just been a huge thing for me lately. Intention has just been like a major, major staple in everything I'm doing. And I'm seeing the small, tiny little benefits of it, if I do it correctly.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think the word intention is being used a lot, and I think it's so important in everything that we do. And as we get into this conversation about intention, I want to leave something to marinate in your head for a little bit. So think about how character relates to intention, as well as integrity, and how that relates to intention. Because I think there's, especially when you get into the conversation about what is mindfulness? What's good practice? What are well-intentioned things? I think there's a certain amount of integrity that needs to come behind intention to build character. And I think you see that a lot in yourself, your friends, the people you interview. And I think it's really hard to get into the conversation about, and I heard Gary Vee and Jay Shetty talking about this recently, is how do you even recognize where character is hiding behind good intention, right? So poor character hiding behind good intention to get something done. I think a good example of this 50, 60 years ago was trying to sell Coca-Cola as a super healthy daily home product that you should absolutely be having because it's going to make you happier, it's going to make your family better. When in reality, come to find out that the science behind it, not quite there. So when we talk about intention, I think the reason I asked that about you is not to actually point out, oh, where's their bad character out there, but rather because it adds a layer of discipline to yourself when you're doing things. It's like you're constantly checking the intention. It's like, okay, I intended to do this for this reason. I wanted to put this out into the world, bring life here, create there. And so there's that level of discipline that I think that brings on you when you add character and integrity to your own equation. It's kind of I think that's kind of like the trinity of growth and progression and positive impact, right? Because if you account for all those things, the energy you're putting out is almost certainly going to be positive.
Yeah, and one thing, because when you talk, you make me think a lot and reflect inward, and I would absolutely love to get your take on this, talking about character integrity within intention. I feel like it's constantly about sort of exposing ourselves in good ways and either being humbled by our wrongdoings or humbling ourselves by peeling back the layer that maybe we're not doing something right that we thought we were. With me, to be honest, lately, that's constantly happening. Constantly unraveling. I feel like I'm being exposed to things and I'm being humbled, but for the better, so it allows me to grow. Because without any failure or mistakes, there's no growth that happens in your life. So being open to that, exposed to that is a beautiful thing, but you have to have that open-mindedness and transparency with yourself.
So let me ask you, what's exposing you? What is that? What is the common thread among the things that are unraveling you?
I would say discipline. Discipline.
What does that mean? Really,
Yeah.
Because I think a commmen thread is
I like this.
discipline.
I feel like I'm getting interviewed. I like this.
And I really want to say it because if it's one thing to judge yourself for not hitting a check mark on a habit tracker, but to you, I really want to know why is it? What is the deeper part of discipline that really is causing you to see these things?
No, I see exactly what you're saying, and to an extent, there is those small things with the habits and not being as disciplined as I should be. But I think it goes beyond that scope and what I was trying to say of not having the discipline and ownership that I should have within different facets of my life. So, for example, say a relationship. Maybe when entering into a new relationship, you are experiencing all these emotions, and because you're not used to it, you're in foreign waters, you don't have the discipline that you thought you had with other things in your life. And that's what I'm saying, where the adversity, obstacle, pain part comes in, because in being undisciplined through this new phase venture in your life, you're exposed to the things you're doing wrong. So I think it's inevitable that this stuff happens, but it's not inevitable that you're open-minded to it. You know what I mean? You cannot be transparent to it, and that will affect you going forward. So I think my growth has really come from accepting that I'm not disciplined and looking at what I did wrong and then going back and being, okay, I know what to do going forward.
So I think because you and I have been talking a lot recently about the concept of love. And I noticed that the example you used in your discipline was that of a romantic relationship. So, like, why that, and why is that, like, what part of that shows you that return? Because, like, I want to hear what you have to say, because I'm just gonna go in on that, because you know I've been talking about this a lot recently.
Sean, because I know we've been talking a lot and we're about to get extremely deep, so if you're sitting down, good. If you're not, I would sit down. No, but Sean has he's very self-aware. He's very just understands life to an extent that I haven't seen other people really do it. And I know he'll probably like downgrade that and try to be humble, but seriously, he does a really good job of it, and experiences he's going through in life are very similar and in sync with mine. So that when we talk about these topics, it's going to be cool to see us both like ping-ponging back and forth.
Yeah, how are you not going to let me humble myself on that? Like I definitely, like, that's a lot, man, and thank you for saying those things. Dude.
Yeah, but back onto the saddle here. For me, I thought I was doing everything right in this new romantic relationship. I thought you're supposed to give all the love you can at all times. You should be there for that person at all times, and you should. But when it overcompensates and you do too much for the other person, you don't prioritize your own time, your own self, and it comes at a toll later on when you either reach a burning point or you reach a point of separation and secession from that person. I mean, that's what just opens the door to your wrongdoing. So for me, I only really realized this in hindsight, like most things in life you do, and reflection start to gain clarity. And for me, I think it's just total lack of discipline and not prioritizing myself.
Yeah.
Myself.
Dude, I think this is part of why you and I get along so well, because I think we're both that type of person. And a huge part of like how I know this of myself, and it's funny because when I was sitting outside waiting to meet up with you to record this podcast, I was reading something, and it was about, in relationships, there's runners and there's givers. And I think both you and I are definitely givers. And I think what the runners do is they'll put up walls and get further away from a person, and that's how they deal with relationships. And maybe and truly that in a way that's their vice, right? Just like with the givers, over giving and losing the sense of self, and overwhelming and loving and loving and loving, or at least believing that's what you're doing. Because I actually don't agree that when you smother someone in what you call love, I don't think that's love. I think what you're talking about with discipline and recognizing those changes, or rather those changes you needed to make because of those experiences you were having and those feelings you felt for this person, I think that's love. I think love is being aware of the cycle that you are going through as a person, and being willing to break that to become a better version of yourself.
That's a discipline I was saying, like having the discipline to break that cycle. Yeah. It's so hard.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I say this as I just, I sometimes I have to catch myself too, because like literally today I wanted to like clean my whole girlfriend's apartment because I don't get to see her all the time because we're long distance, and I wanted to just like help her with every little thing, and I realized like, and kind of like from a little bit from watching her response, and even from catching myself from my own past mistakes. And I think that's the biggest thing, is I was like, oh, wait, no, I need to let her do this. I'm going to encourage her because I know she's having a lot of things coming at her. And certainly I believe that it's in my way of showing things and to create a productive and healthy relationship is to support her. At the same time, I need to be aware of how I'm supporting her. Does she need somebody to dote on her and to consistently smother her with things right now? Or does she need somebody to encourage her and then give her space? And I think that goes into the point about the runners and the givers, is I think we all have a little bit of it in us. And I don't think either one is right or wrong.
Exactly.
It's about being aware of what love you can give in the moment. And I think some of us have predispositions to one or the other. And in that way, it's harder for us to give space. But I think that's our learning point. And that's a huge thing that we learn from love, in addition to all the other things that we see as a result of experiencing a joyful and present moment with somebody. Because like when you wind down from that and you kind of like, for that moment of joy and that bit of love, you kind of like break that cycle, the monotony, the moments of being less present. And when you wind down from that and you come back a different person. And you come back from, and I'm saying a lot of this without context because I'm very much developing this thought. I sent you a draft today. And it was about the Ouroboros and life, and as well as the concept of Israel meaning to wrestle with God.
Yeah, and I'll quote what he sent me, one of the quotes by Marcus Aurelius. And just so you know, Sean is a good writer, and he's coming out and embracing more of his writing, not so much as a hobby now. I think it can eventually be like somewhat of a career in a way. And I think you're reaching that, but I just wanted to mention before I get in, Sean's a very strong writer, but the quote is by Marcus Aurelius, and he said, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing." So I think that's what you're talking about with wrestling with life.
Yeah. And so I think there are many triggers to when we have to choose to wrestle with life and really like overcome something. I think what you mentioned about discipline, and especially in the context, and I think it's great that you brought up in the context of romance, because I think that's where a lot of us experience our highest amounts of growth. And I think that's why love has been so important archetypally throughout history in growing not just men but women as well into their own roles, because it really acts as a mirror and shows us where we're not disciplined. And so what I was saying is, like, for that moment when you have that huge blissful second of love, however long it is, however long you're in that present moment, you experience a high, and then you come down, and in that moment you're kind of like breaking the cycle. You're like you're seeing something differently. You're whether you want to call it a higher state of consciousness or just a more joyous moment, the reality is it's a state, and you return from that state. But when you return from that state, you come at it with new eyes. And I think it's when we come back with new eyes that we start to see where we're not disciplined. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But it's also a very difficult thing. Yeah. Because then you have to deal with the pain of, okay, what did I just learn? And do I want to do anything about it? Can I do anything about it? Will I do anything about it? And then that in and of itself is a whole nother process of breaking a cycle and becoming a newer, deeper version of yourself.
That's like having that. Now it's like having the discipline to implement and take action on those things that you're realizing, which is extremely, extremely difficult. But another quote I want to mention within Sean's piece that will eventually come out. He said, by Hermann Hesse, is that pronounced
Hermann
correct?
Hesse.
Hermann Hesse. He said, "The bird struggles out of the egg. The egg is the world. He who would be born must first destroy world." So I feel like, to be honest, talk about quotes. I'm a quote addict. It's like to know thyself is to forget thyself. You have to first tear down, strip, expose yourself to everything you thought you knew. And then to just completely maybe just change worlds and be okay with that. And I feel like in between that transition, also being okay with the uncertainty and losing yourself a little bit, because there can be a negative connotation brought along with the word being lost. But as Oprah says, another quote for you, we often lose ourselves to find ourselves again. So it's all, they're both needed. They're both important and should be fully accepted.
So I actually love that you brought out that hidden part of the quote, because I think anyone who is close to me or anyone who's been to, there's been a few workshops that I've held to where that quote has been the central theme. And I actually, so as you guys maybe know, Anthony hosts an organization called Flow, and they had me come in and I did a workshop as well as a walking meditation with them. And I actually had to work to not use that quote because to me, it encompasses so much of the essence of life. And you actually just touched on the flip side of that. There's the very obvious side, which is like to grow, you must break through something. You must endure pain to see and become a part of a new perspective. And therefore, you are different. And when you become different, the world around you is different because you interpret it differently.
Yeah, well, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change, right?
Mm-hmm. And what the opposite side, I wouldn't even call it the opposite. The side that's hidden behind that meeting is, what are you doing when you're not pushing out of the egg? You're finding something. You're being intentional and you're being deliberate. And sometimes it's okay to not be breaking the eggshell. Sometimes you need to know exactly what point on that shell you need to push to get out. And in that way, it's okay to take the path of least resistance. And since I know you love quotes, I'm sure you've heard it. It's that suffering equals pain times resistance.
Yes. Yes, I heard that one the other day.
And so what you hit on is like, sometimes you don't need to force yourself to be doing anything. It's just when the time comes to endure that pain and you know it's time to change, whether it's with a romance and you're seeing the mirror of that love, or you just happen to be at work and you have this like revelatory moment and you're like, man, I could have been doing this so much better. Or, you know what? I've been miserable in this 9 to 5 for the last 3 months. And you have to make that choice to either remove yourself from the situation, make it better, or to endure it for how long.
And change your outlook on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so when you have to make those decisions, in any case, it's like that. It's more important to have that realization than it is to just be pounding at the edge of your shell, hoping to get out.
Yeah, and that's actually an excellent leeway into talking about like flow itself. As we're flowing into the topic of flow, it's like, when are those moments of stepping back and just sort of accepting what's going on and letting go, and just not to get too cliche, but just letting the universe do its thing, stepping out of your own way. And I know you have a lot to say on that.
Yeah. So Anthony, like actually a mutual friend of ours, Josh, asked me that last night. And I told him was I need to think about it. That is like, because that question itself, if you can even begin to articulate an answer to something like that, I think that's like very incredible. And I think you have to be like very respectful of that entire concept of flow when you answer it. And I think the core of it is there's actually, this will be partially something that I heard at International Yoga Day last Friday in Boston. I was in Boston at the time, and there was a celebration going on at the Massachusetts State House, and also between a conversation that I had last night about practice. And when it comes to flow, I think there's lots of way people talk about getting to flow. There's, and as you know, as you're an athlete as well, Anthony, when you're playing ball or when you're on the football field and you just hit that moment where you're in it, right? You're in it. You almost like reach a different state of consciousness and things start to be going right
it's like
for you.
Based off intuition. You just start, yeah.
And there's also, I'm sure when you're creating, and I know this happens for me sometimes when I write, sometimes when I code, that you get into that flow. And that comes through practice, right? Like if you were a first-time soccer player tomorrow, you probably would have no idea. You would be so focused mentally on what was happening with your feet that you wouldn't be able to experience what was outside of that and really let your mind be present with the sport, as well as with the practice of meditation. I think this is why so many people meditate and why so many people are finding value in the West especially, is that they're able to, and I actually don't really like the phrase quieting the mind, because I think you can't really quiet the mind.
Yeah.
And I actually, but to not get too far off topic on that, I think with meditation, we're learning to accept the mind and all of the things that it tells us. And in that, we can reach a state of flow. And there's that practice of, okay, are we able to notice what's happening with the mind and notice what's happening beyond that? So are we in, and I'll give an example of how I experienced flow recently is 2 weeks ago, I was in the Boston Public Gardens. Beautiful space. It's like a very mini Central Park. And there was this old Chinese man playing the erhu, right? And
what's the erhu?
It's like a 2-stringed violin is the best way to describe it. You've heard it. If you've heard any like classical Chinese music, it's got it feels like the air around you is resonating. That's the kind of sound that it gives off. And I sat there and listened to the man for like 40 minutes. I had no idea that much time had passed. I sat in front of him and I just watched people go by and watched the wind blow. It was a beautiful day for 40 minutes. And then I realized time had passed and I said, oh, let me go talk to him. Because I speak a little bit of Mandarin, so I was like,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I guess you didn't know that.
No, I didn't.
Oh, yeah. I studied abroad a few years back in Chengdu, China. But anyway, so I was like,
I want to learn. We'll talk about that.
I was like, I was like, this guy's been watching me watch him for like 40 minutes. So let me go say hi, and let me break that comfort zone. But anyways, like for those 40 minutes, and in the 10 minutes that I sat next to him, I was just like, it didn't matter. I'd forgotten where I came from. I had forgotten that I needed to go do work for one of the contracts that I was doing, and that I had a dinner to go to that night, and that I was probably going to like be pushing it to the limit, but it didn't matter in that moment. And I think, so to take that from practice to that example I gave to what I learned last Friday is this was shared from, he's a very young man, but very wise. He worked at NASA for a few years. He went back to India to study yoga. And now he comes back and he practices.
Wow.
And there's the concept of yoga. And I'm really just paraphrasing here. I don't know any more than what I'm saying. But what he shared was there's the concept of yoga, and that's when the universe aligns things at random. Right? So just when things happen to work out, and that's constantly happening around us, right? And I know, Anthony, you've done yoga for 5 years. You know that yoga helps you become more present and more aligned. In unity with your mind, body, and soul.
Exactly, yeah.
And what he said was there's yoga, there's these universal alignments happening around us, and we practice yoga to be able to notice when those things are happening.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not that we're creating those things within us. It's that we're allowing us to be ourselves, to be conscious of when those things are happening. And that's when you get into noticing the synchronicity and the joy and the power of the things happening around you. So yeah, if you're talking about flow, I think there's a practice part of it. And then there's the part where you shouldn't judge yourself too much when you don't practice. Because I think that's part of allowing things to align for yourself.
Yeah. That is very in-depth, like, beautiful unraveling of that explanation. And I really, it brought it back. I don't know why it made me realize this thing, but I feel like I was going to ask you, in what ways do you work on, just like someone would practice yoga, to help them become more aware in mind, body, soul, to then be applying it to life? Like, are there ways in which you can maybe put things in sync for yourself? So for example, I love this because it makes me think about intention, the power of intention. Like, setting your meaning, purpose, intent on one thing and not being fixated by a result, but just letting the intention sort of guide the things happening in your life. So eventually they can be in sync. And like, for me, meditation has been, it's absolutely crucial to like every part of my being that I am today. And I pay homage to it so much, to all the successes I've had. Obviously, I can talk about like my parents and family and all that, but like meditation has allowed me to gather myself, become more aware, like you said, with the yoga, and then like set my intention on the things I'm doing, so that like it really feels like I'm doing them because they feel right and because it's in sync with all I want to achieve as I grow as a person. So, like, in what ways do you practice that yourself to sort of get in a life full of flow?
Well, I don't think you can have a life full of flow. I think that I don't think
Life with more
I
flow.
I don't think we can ever reach a full state of flow. I think that would actually, and this is kind of the basis of what I sent you today about the cycle and breaking the cycle, coming back with new, fresh perspective, is like, we can't be out of the cycle forever. We wouldn't have a body. We wouldn't have a mind. We wouldn't be here with other people if we were outside of that cycle. And so I don't think it's, just to make that point, I don't think it's possible to be in flow all the time.
So, I'm going to interrupt you for a sec because that is exactly what it is. Like, I think the meditation hasn't allowed me to get into flow more. It's allowed me to be aware of when I am.
Yeah.
So I think the awareness, thank you so much for that. The awareness, it's brought me more mindfulness, more observation, and more stillness of just everything I'm doing. And that's just been monumental for my just like being as a person.
Yeah.
And I know for you, do you practice a meditation frequently for yourself or no?
Yeah, so I meditate pretty much every day. There are times when I don't. Like this weekend I didn't because I was in a constant state of travel and things were changing for me, so I didn't really have that routine to back it up. Which is okay sometimes, because I think in the moment it was better for me to just go be with my friends, be with my family, than it was to worry about getting up and meditating at 7:15 or whatever time it was that I set for that week. But I do meditate pretty much every day. I also, and as you know this, I've only just started to get into yoga. But for me, I think the biggest thing is I learned to journal in a very specific way. There's this book called The Artist's Way, and it teaches you a way to do a stream of consciousness journaling that actually, it's almost like meditation when you notice the mind and you see what it's saying and you let it come through and you let it pass. In this way, you let it pass onto the page. And you don't let the mind censor itself, because you know when you have a thought and you're like, oh, this is a good thing to say, or oh, this is way too intense, I shouldn't use that curse word, or I shouldn't do this. You actually don't let the mind censor itself, and you say, okay, what was the first thing that came up? Even if it's the censoring, even if I'm like, oh, F, and then you write it, and then you notice that in your mind you are censoring it, you write what you said to censor it, and you just go and you go.
Wow, that's deep.
And I did that consistently for every single morning. And the idea was to do 3 pages, loose leaf paper, every day. I did that for 120 days.
Really?
Yeah, I did that for the first 4+ months of this year. And so now when I journal, it's almost like that every time.
And so you'll probably get into this, but what benefits have you seen from those 4 months and then after?
I'm less afraid to write, and I'm less afraid to say what I'm thinking. And I also know when I'm censoring myself in numerous areas of life. So one way that I could have censored myself was I could have not spoken to that man in the park in Chinese, because you know what? I'm just this kid who knows the language conversationally, but who am I? He might not be able to communicate with me. I'm not be able to communicate with him. I don't have enough experience to know if I would be offensive to him or not. I have no idea. But to me, I was like, that I realized that was a censor. That what those thoughts were, and so it lowers the level of inhibition I have.
I was gonna say, it sort of sounds like you're extirpating the flinch. You're just completely taking out that moment of flinch when you think you shouldn't do something, or there's a judgment within, and you're just wiping that out and sort of making a gateway to go towards just action and like letting those things play out.
I think the flinch is actually a really good point, because it's like if I were to pump my fist at you right now and you didn't move, it doesn't change the fact that I pumped my fist at you, but your awareness said, I'm not going to move. I'm going to move in the direction that I want to. And so I think flinch is actually a really good point, because flinching, you can flinch or not at a stimuli, but at the end of the day, it's like, are you giving into the subconscious, or are you being more conscious about it?
Well, I was just gonna say you're acting less on like amygdala or like impulse. Basically, like amygdala is the part of the brain in which you act on emotion more. So it's like you're more conscious of that, and you're able to control it more.
Yeah, I think maybe that's a big part of it. But I would say that was, and I didn't know it at the time. I knew it helped me get some emotions out and some thoughts out as I was doing it. But I'm like now, months after, I've kind of like, I'm not doing it consistently. Because I think, honestly, like, I don't think everybody, if you do it every day, good for you. If you can write 3 loose leaf papers of just your thoughts every day, fantastic. I think it's good for me to take a break, see how I'm like existing with that. And if I ever need to get back into it, I know that I can, and I know that I've had the discipline to do it. It's actually crazy. I don't know what to do with all those pages I have, because they're crammed into a folder. And I'm actually like, I'm thinking about this because like this, as I briefly mentioned before, or maybe not actually during this recording, is that, Anthony, you know, I'm currently couch surfing in the Northeast. I've stayed with you for a few nights actually. And so I realize now that I have all this stuff at home that like I don't really like need. And a huge part of like that, and back to like the first thing we talked about, the discipline, breaking the cycle, I notice that I have things that I don't need. I notice that I pad my room with things that like I only used for purchase dopamine. Like I just like that little bit of dopamine when I purchased it. Maybe it was a clothing item that I wore once. I thought it was cool. And then I was like, you know, this really isn't me, but I guess I looked cool that one time. Now I'm like, oh, okay, like I don't need these things. And so it's up to me to be disciplined to go home and say, you're right, I don't. I'm going to do things that are me, and I'm going to have things that are intentional.
Exactly. Well,
and I need the character to back up the intention that I have.
There you go. That's all the layers stacked. But like, I was going to ask, are you sort of more, in reflection, more of a minimalist, but not in the sense of just like owning less things, but like having a minimalist mindset in the fact of you're so intentional and you really care about the things that you own less things because that's what you want as an individual?
I think that's what I want as an individual. I don't think I'm anywhere near that. However, it's something that I've been a lot more conscious of in the last few months. I also know that I have this I love material things. They're just, I'm not a car guy, but I know like this bracelet I'm wearing that my dad got me, I know I would wear it every single day just because it's my style, but it's also like not something I could have picked up at a Ross, you know? And I think that part of it, like the little bit of like materialist side to it, I actually take joy in. And so for me, it's like, I think that's part of like deciding what minimalism means to you is like, okay, is everything that I have intentional? Right now, I don't think that everything I have is intentional, nor do I think that every purchase I make is intentional, even at the time of recording. And certainly tomorrow, I won't be making super intentional things. But I think it's a journey. And I think it's about bringing into our lives things that matter to us and being willing to let go of things that don't. But I can't say for sure that like I've done anything super profound. I hope that I will in the coming months, especially when I return home. I'm thinking about like how I can just I can have a much emptier, cleaner, and more profound space in my home, and I can look at what I do have and be more aware rather than seeing clutter and being like, oh, great, I have things. I can look at the one or two pictures on my wall and be like, oh, that picture means a lot to me. here's what I think about it. Here's why it matters to me. And so I'd like to be able to do that with all of my things rather than having a stack of video games that I haven't touched in 4 years. But, I guess I had great memories with them 4 years ago. But in the current moment, they're not serving me.
Yeah. And the one thing that's sort of boiling to the surface of my mind is there is, to be honest, no literal right way for anyone. And I think the whole underlying, the foundation of what this conversation is based upon is like just being aware and mindful of those things occurring, being appreciative of what you're going through, the journey and process of growing and knowing there's not one right thing, rather you need both for you to move forward.
Yeah. And I think in some ways when you asked me that question, I didn't realize at the time that I was being a bit hard on myself in that point where I was like, that was one of the things in this conversation. I was searching for a right way in describing that. So I think, but at the same time, it's recognizing that there's not a right way, but being self-aware of, are you following your way? And that's the key. And I think when you can simultaneously shut out the noise, but still deal with the pain of stepping further onto your path, I think that's where the growth happens.
I just think that's the value of the stillness I talked about. It's like when you just shut everything out, you're able to look inward more. And talking about the topics we first based this conversation upon is like those things of love, and I'll add money, social media. Those are just things to expose ourselves to ourselves and just like look inward more. So the whole goal, strive, is to just look at who you are more and just have that mirror where there's no judgment and the mirror just bounces yourself back to yourself. If that makes sense.
Exact sense. That makes exact sense. And I think as soon as that is okay, I was getting really deep there.
Got deep in thought. You were,
but I think what you'll realize is when you become disciplined and you look at that mirror for whatever reason it's placed in front of you, and no matter how much pain you're going through, when you go through this period of growth and you have the opportunity to overcome it, realize that the thing that you're looking at in the mirror, all of the positive, the negative, is yourself, and it's something to be accepted, and that there's a light behind that, and that light is you, and that light is the you that you're becoming one step at a time. And I think Anthony, you remember when, wow, it was almost 2 weeks ago at this point when we had the flow session. It was 2 weeks ago at this point, actually. That's crazy.
Yeah, wow, it is.
So 2 weeks ago was when I did the workshop with Energy's group Flow, and we actually talked about self-discipline, self-love, self-acceptance, self-discovery.
The topic was literally self-acceptance.
Yeah.
And
what we did was when we did the walking meditation, one of the things I asked you to visualize after an initial reflection prior to the meditation was, on the left side of the path, what are all these like negative things, thoughts, people affecting you? On the right side of the path, who are the people you love? What are the things that happened to you today that were incredible? What are these positive aspects of yourself? And then I asked you to walk down the middle of them and accept them, to invite them on the road with you. And I think when you do that, that's the same as looking in the mirror and accepting what's in the mirror, right? You're bringing it along with you, and actually because of that, you realize that even though there's negative thoughts on the left side and positive thoughts on the right side, they actually all, when you accept them, they're all part of the light that is you, and they allow you to walk into the world with more purpose, more love, more intention. And that for me has been that I've only even begun thinking of it that way a few months ago, when I was going through like a tough time, and it's the craziest thing. And I'll give a backstory on that thought because it's kind of goofy.
Good.
I played this video game almost religiously growing up. It's a cross between this like Japanese anime type video game studio and Disney. So you have like anime people hanging out with Disney characters in a game called Kingdom Hearts. And there's this character who basically kills his friend, is super mean to Mickey Mouse and Donald and Goofy, and he goes through this journey of like realizing that he was being a very terrible person, and he comes back out the other side. He spends the course of a game, and so like this is a good long period of time in this game, in the second one, actually redeeming himself. And when he has the opportunity to redeem himself and he comes out the other side, he realizes he's actually on ground zero because he was kind of undoing and accepting the things he had done before. And so he's asked, are you going to walk towards the light, or are you going to walk towards the darkness that you used to create, or this light that you just created? And he says, neither. I'm going to walk down the middle. And so when he says he's going to walk down the middle, he's asked, are you just going to walk towards one and then the other, essentially, towards twilight, which is a mixture of like darkness and light. It's just like that period of time in between. And he says, no, I'm actually going to walk towards dawn, meaning that period of time where it's dark, but the sun is coming up. So in that way, he's accepting his darkness, but allowing the light within himself to come through by accepting all of it. And that's a consistent path. That's a journey that like you can always walk towards that horizon. And when I realized that this little bit of a game from my childhood had so much to say to me, 15 years after playing it for the first time, I was mind blown, and it spoke to me in that moment because I was going through job transition and different like friendship transitions and you know, just making sure that I was taking care of loving my family and stuff like that. And it was really difficult for me. But then I saw that and I was like, wait a second. I can take these things that I was looking at as negative and these things that I was looking at as positive. I can choose not to judge them, accept them as a whole, and bring them with me and grow.
Yeah.
And I think that was like a very transformational moment for me.
Wow. And
I think that realization, that little video game quote that I remembered is actually the foundation for a lot of what we talked about today, which is really weird to think about. But I think anyone who actually looking back at how I've been throughout my life, there's probably like no other way I would have figured out something as deep as that, which is just speaks a lot of art, its different forms, its ability to bring something out from within us. And the fact that even cooler is we now have all this technology to help us do that. And I think there's real positivity that can be created with technology. You and I could get into like whether that's happening or not. And what are we, like people like you and I, what are we going to do about it? But I think even that example in and of itself shows that this medium, video games, that people are saying, oh, it makes people fat or lazy or whatever, it also can be used as an art medium to create that kind of attachment and spiritual rejuvenation that I was able to receive because that came from somebody else's place of creation, and because they created and gave that to me, I was able to see that, take it, and create in my own life.
It's funny. There's so many dots I'm connecting. I know a good friend who's actually writing a dissertation on how video games create empathy, which is really interesting. They have to defend soon, but I know she'll get it. But the one thing I wanted to ask you, which is a good transitioning, what are you most anticipated or excited about for the future? So I know you just talked about things with technology and the mediums they can provide. What thing are you really excited about?
The fact that there is one. Like,
Explain.
That's like, I'm not really like excited about AI or Uber or self-driving cars. I think they're cool. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to start to be able to feed so many people, and hopefully, like, please, I hope that's the way things go. I think we're going to be able to do things that we didn't even think were possible 5 years ago in 5 more years. Like, you never know where technology is going to take us. But for me, it's just the fact that we do get a tomorrow is the best part about it. And I think everybody's so caught up in like how many, well, I think this is actually important. I think we should be concerned about how many years we have to do stuff. But there are so many people, especially when you get into the nihilism of, oh, we have X amount of years to solve global warming. We have X amount of years to sort this part of the internet out so it can be healthy for us. Or we have X amount of years to figure out how we're going to deal with AI and develop it in a human way, or even if we can, or even know if we can answer that question in the first place, then I think that all of those questions are very valid. But I think on the more abstract, I think the real answer, and I think this answer kind of, it may not solve all of those problems, but it certainly puts us in the state of consciousness to start solving them better, is to just be like, yeah, the best part about tomorrow is that it exists.
That's I ask people that question all the time. That's the best answer I've ever heard. Seriously. I mean, like, that's a great way to look at it. And the way you framed it too, I really, that gives me a whole different set of eyes in looking at those things going forward. So I appreciate you for even bringing that up. But overall, I just want to ask, is there anything you would like to conclude with now that we reached a peak of our conversation, maybe certain thoughts on your mind, maybe things you're going through right now that you want to gift or have insight, advice to other people listening, just anything, nothing, whatever you're feeling. I just want to leave it out on the table for you.
Well, first, I want to say I appreciate you hopefully as much as you know, I feel the appreciation from you coming towards me. I'm very grateful for that, and I'm so happy to be here and talk about these things with you. And I know you, starting as soon as tomorrow morning, you and I are going to be on our Messenger DMs talking about some quote. I'd send you like a Stoic philosopher, like the quote I sent you this morning from Marcus Aurelius, or whatever else. I know we're going to get right back into it as soon as this podcast is over, but I am so grateful to be here. And the thing I you know, so much of what I said is at the abstract, like how I like to think about the world, or at least how I'm even beginning to think about it. I don't claim to really even understand everything that I'm saying. I'm starting to feel what it is that I'm saying and practice it in my day to day. I think it's the only way. I think if that's the only way I'm able to articulate it in the first place. I would say, so I'll get more into the specifics of like something that I'm going through then. Lots of changes. You know, I'm doing and realizing that I'm not going to get along with people all the time. And there's a way to let things go with people in a way that's positive. And I think it's just accepting that, and it's hard to do. And I, you know, thankfully, it was the craziest thing because it's not, and you know I've talked about this recently with you, is the act of letting go. It's the strangest feeling because you don't know what to think about it. You just know that when you can let go, you have. And so to me, it's realizing that in my current relationship, it's like I've never had an instance where I could love somebody and be like, oh, okay, if this ended today, I would be fine with it. I would be totally happy with it. And in that same way, on the flip side, when I recently had a business deal that didn't really go very well, not happy about how it was handled. I think that there could be a million definitions of good faith or how we're going to communicate or how you can expect to communicate, and even the rules for communication that you can create in a business deal. And I think that somebody, you know, I think they very blindly violated these. I think that I think they could have been more self-aware of how they were handling things, and I think they were not necessarily. I think as much as I may have not been listening to them, because like, look, if you received me as like having not been listening or understanding what you're saying, then I have to take that very respectfully, because I think it's very possible that I wasn't. Maybe there's an angle. Maybe you were trying to tell me something that I didn't see. I also know that this person wasn't hearing what I was saying, because of the way they were returning what I was saying back at me. And so I think what I learned is, in addition to how it's almost simultaneous. It's not like an added thing, but it was like I was able to look at my current relationship with so much love, but also realize like, okay, I'm at peace with however this goes. With this, it was like, wow, this person actually put me in a very, like, the way this went down, I did a lot of work, and I'm not in a good financial situation because of it, because of the way they decided to handle whatever it is that they wanted to handle. Because I can't even describe it, because frankly, it still confuses me. The way they went about doing this, it's not something I really conceived of. But being willing to say, it's okay. Like,
well, yeah,
I'm
like loving them too. Yeah,
it's like I'm gonna figure out my own thing, and just because the situation for you was you're gonna win, and hopefully I'm saying I as in myself, right? So they were thinking that they would win, and hopefully I would win. Sean would win, but if not, that's okay. I'm still gonna approach it from I would like to win. I would like you to win. So if this is what you need to do to win, I'm gonna go win with myself. And that's okay. And so, like, be willing to learn from those poor exchanges and to not hold resentment. And I think, and I don't know what else to make of that, because that literally happened yesterday. And it's okay. I'm figuring it out, and the journey continues. And I think that goes into what I said earlier about, like, we get to have it tomorrow. So, like, what's there to be? What are we worried about?
Yeah, just take it in stride. And the way you connected those two things and just talked about it, that's really, really profound and powerful. But it's cool to see you, like, go through those things and, like, observe and watch how you handle it. And I hope people do the same and apply it to their lives, and just overall for everyone listening, and that they apply what they've heard in their own type of way. Like, as we all have our different ways of making our own cake in life, you add your own ingredients to make your own unique cake for your life, for yourself. So just thanks again, man. And this is more than awesome.
Thank you, man. Let's go bake those cakes.
Yeah.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.